Welcome everyone. It is IKYA Live. It is world news from the spiritual perspective and the only program on the internet where you can get real spiritual advice for your real life. And tonight we've got a really challenging and interesting topic. It's 2 weeks today since the massive earthquake hit Turkey and northern Syria. And official numbers are well over 40,000 who have died and many thousands more who have been injured, and up in the millions who are left homeless and dealing with cities that are completely destroyed, large apartment buildings that have been flattened. It's really a level of devastation that we maybe haven't seen since the tsunami in 2004. So it's really quite it's a significant event, and it really, I think it is an important thing for spiritual students and those of spiritual study to really reflect on the role that these kinds of events play in the world. And that's really what tonight's discussion is all about. This is a major news event. It's a major happening in our world. And I'm going to turn the discussion over to IKYA to start kind of what is the spiritual perspective on such an occurrence. IKYA.
I think I'd like to start by being more general. The title for tonight is If This Is God's Punishment. And these things, of course, happen all over the place, small and large. And the question of if we are being punished, to me, is interesting and stupid, because it's mainly what we see when these things happen is that it's religious people who think it's got something to do with God punishing them or punishing someone. Back in the days, for instance, in the States, it was, women. It was a lot of women. When there were earthquakes and floods, whatever, it was because of women and women in the workplace. And if we go back in time in Europe, it was because of books. It was because of everything that one can say is against some form of belief system. And then it was the civil rights movements, and now for a couple of decades, when things happen, there are floods and all of that, it's the gays. And now it's the trans people, especially, it seems like God is especially concerned with trans people needed to go to the bathroom and is then punishing people for that. It's always that, And also when it comes to punishment, the why people of religion get so obsessed about it is, I've talked about this quite a bit. It's when you self-oppress, right? By having a belief system, and then you force yourself into not doing things that are natural for you. And you feel that you're kind of punishing yourself every day. And then you see people living happy, productive lives, and they break all the rules on a daily basis, and they seem to get away with it. And that's very unfair. So you basically hope that they will be punished. And of course, they should be punished because they're breaking the rules. So when something happens, you want it so badly to be your God punishing people, because then it's worth it, right? And then you can feel powerful because you're on the right team. And it also means that your self-oppression is then worth it. Because if you cannot see or experience the result and the benefits of your self-oppression, at least you can see the consequences if you're not doing those sacrifices. And you feel very powerful. So this is kind of just human psychology, and it's silly. And also, the interesting thing is that people will always think that God is on their team, meaning that enemies will both claim that God is on their side and punishing their enemies and all of that. And it's just part of how humans operate. And even when things like the current earthquake, when it's happening, people have those thoughts, right? Even in modern spirituality, because we like to judge, right? It makes us feel better because we're not sure if we are doing the right thing, if we're having the right practices, all of that. So if we can then look at someone being punished or that it's because of this, it means that at least it's not us. So I think walking on a spiritual path, we also need to be aware of that. It's part of human psychology. And we should never be so arrogant that we don't believe that we also are part of that. We just have to be aware, right? And choose to go beyond it. So, when these things happen, if we first just look at why do earthquakes happen, why do big disasters happen, it's always connected to our own process, but often in a different way than humans are aware of. Now, first, there is this spezocentric way of looking at it, where humans always think it's them. Everything is about humans. What if God punished everyone because tigers are assholes? What if God is punishing the bacteria or the virus because they're terrible? Why is it always humans? And especially marginalized humans trying to express themselves and to be free. Why is it always that? And it's this whole idea, that first you have an almighty God in an endless universe, right? And then he's particularly interested in primates on a very small, insignificant planet, and especially what they do when they're naked and where they go to the bathroom, right? It's just, humans are part of this planet. It could be that this planet doesn't really notice humans. Just like you in your body, you have a lot of different cells, a lot of different bacteria, but you don't notice because it's one body. I know it's difficult for humans to grasp this, but on this planet, humans are simply a type of cell with specific purpose for the planet. So if we shift our attention and see the planet as the organism and the being, and then just like you have bacteria in your intestines to digest, humans as a life form is actually part of the digestive system on this planet. Let me explain. What humans are good at, and is quite unique for the human life form on this planet, is that humans have the ability to think in kind of more abstract ways, right? We can think, we can reflect, we can process, we can digest, we have feelings, we have creativity, we do weird stuff. We express ourselves, we innovate, we make stuff, which means we're part of the bridge between the abstract and manifestation. We can actually make manifestations. No other beings on this planet can do that. So, when we also understand that when we have a certain form of karma, whatever it is, and we have it inside of us, it needs to externalize. This is what humans do. This is why we have this need to make stuff and do stuff, because we are externalizing our consciousness and our own resistance on what we're trying to figure out. Now, when you look at the planet, it can't do that. Unless it can. Just like you need bacteria in order to digest, this planet digests and processes and reflects through humans. So, humans are part of what's going on this planet. And it happens very concretely. Just like, when you have a certain presence in your digestion, that will attract certain bacteria, certain enzymes, whatever it is. Humans are the same way. Humans have no idea that we also operate in that way for the planet. The planet cannot think, we can. So when there is, for instance, a karmic resistance and tension that needs to be processed, you can't just send the birds. What humans do so magnificently is internalizing, externalizing, creating conflicts, doing this, doing that. So we unpack, we experience, we do stuff and try to figure out what's what. So we're helping the planet by being human. And this is kind of how mirroring works. It's not just passive, it's an active dialogue. So, how these things work is when you think of manifestations lacking the ability to process, and then you have humans already in an inner process that needs external manifestation. This is how it happens. So, if you think of what's happening inside of you, whatever is going on, wherever you are spiritually, you need to externalize it because that's how we figure things out. That's the reason why all of this exists. It's because as pure consciousness, we need to go through certain steps before we're able to resolve karma and reach realization, understand, and build consciousness. And this is what all these worlds are for. So we basically interact with our own consciousness and our own karma by interacting with the world. So, if you think of every single vibration, every single piece of karma, it's information and vibration. And that is also location. Simply put, if you think of a piano and you have the note A440, that's a specific key on that whole keyboard. And every time you want to activate that specific tone, you need to press that key. So it means whenever anyone has a specific type of vibration in space and time and manifestation, that's also location. So when you wander around like a complex of information, karma that's not resolved, just like trying to play a piece of music on the piano, you will have to press a lot of keys. So it will be drawn there, 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 and it will be a sequence. So you go from that place to that place, that manifestation, that manifestation. That's your life journey. It's basically a piano concerto that you're trying to play. And it's very specific. It's only that key and that key and that key and that key in a specific order. Because that's the sequencing of your own karma. So, karma, vibration is also location. And that means everything that vibrates the same way, with the same type of information, will have to exist in the exact same spot. And this is how mirroring works. Now, what exists in nature and the process in nature, and also the journey of the planet, will contain resistance and karma and growth. So it's both, you as an individual, but it's also other beings and the whole planet. But when there are specific types of resistance, that will then occur as manifestation, a specific place, specific time, specific form. And because you vibrate the same, you will have to be in that same spot, which means that you will then be experiencing the externalization of your own karma. And of course, you have no idea. And that's why it hits you in the face. Because sometimes that location literally is this exact same spot that you're standing. So then you're forced to interact with that. So it means through that process, the planet and the planetary consciousness and the collective consciousness of all beings will also be able to explore their karma through the process that you as a human offer, with all of that messiness that we call human life, both as an individual and also as groups. So even in a country, that vibration, remember also when we incarnate in a certain country, in a certain culture, certain ethnicity, it's because that represents location, an outer form reflecting your own exact karma. And that's all. And sometimes even the evolution of a culture or a certain group will then follow the expressions of the planet in that exact area because the location does not change. So this is not just a moment-to-moment thing. It can also be a process for hundreds and thousands of years. So you have your own kind of sequence and being drawn to certain places, certain events that represent you. Then you have your participation in different forms of collective spaces where it also happens. Often then it's a slower process. And then you have nations. Same thing. There's a reason why a certain nation is where it is. And also when you can feel, I'm sure many can do that, when you cross a border, right, from one country to another, you can feel the energy shifting. It can be very clear sometimes. I always like, when I fly, I don't fly myself. When I find myself on an airplane, I can always feel these kind of walls of energy. It's very physical. So I can feel, oh, okay, we're passing that border now because I can feel it, the shift, very concretely. And it's also because it's in the ground and it's in the collective consciousness because it becomes the same. When you find a mirror that works, you will kind of, get used to that mirror and it will become a conversation because this is what it is. It's conversation. So life is also trying to figure itself out through you as the cell, helping also the planetary consciousness in digesting and reflecting and making things concrete and unpacking because it can't just happen by itself. And the planet can then offer the manifestation part of it, right? So it's a co-creation and it's a dialogue and it's learning to understand that. So there is never punishment. There's only this exchange of trying to figure things out. And this is a language we can actually learn. Did you have a question?
Question from Zoom. In this particular case, then, in this conversation with nature, what karma is being mirrored in Turkey and Syria?
Right. The way to go about interpreting these type of things, because we can look at this as a case study, right, for you to learn. Now, before I answer that question, I will just explain how these things work. The easiest way to get started is by understanding that this is a language that you already speak. You dream. Your subconscious are fully aware of this language. All life forms speak the same language. It's through symbols. So nature will project itself and express itself as part of this common language that we all speak. And this is why people dream the same way. Animals dream the same way. All life forms, they experience the same level of symbolism, and we exchange information, and we're part of that conversation, all of us. Just that our culture, we have done such a good job trying to erase any collective knowledge. If you go to indigenous cultures, they're much more aware of this language. Wherever you go around the world, they interpret things the same way because it is part of who we are. Now, so when something happens in your life, and remember, every single thing you experience is part of this conversation. They represent words, grammar, symbols, concepts. It's all part of this language. Every single thing. Because it's still the externalization of our process. And life also recognizing, oh, all right, you're vibrating that thing. Well, I need access to your abstract mind and subconscious to digest the tension that is right here. So you'll be drawn to a certain situation where that is part of it. And sometimes that's part of your triggering. Life needs you to be triggered so that you can open up your process and be engaged. It's all part of the conversation. So the easy way to get started is simply to ask yourself, when something happens, basically, if I dreamt this, what would it mean? If I look at everything as symbols, what would it mean? So hopefully you're used to your own dream language, right? And you're used to there being symbols and things, but it's just use your imagination. And you can also turn it around and say, okay, if I were to use this manifestation as a symbol of something, when would I use this as a symbol? Right? That's also a way to try to understand this language. Because if you don't overcomplicate it and you just listen, you will get the hang of it. Because you already know this language. So it's not difficult, but the way to get started as well is look at your dreams and then use your imagination whenever something catches your attention. Just like say, okay, if I were to use this as a symbol, when would I use it? Right? And you will then start looking at the world as a picture book. You will start by major kind of symbols and things you can gradually decode, and then it becomes more sophisticated. But it's really simple. So when we look at earthquakes, now the way also to decipher manifestative symbols is first looking at the manifestation and describing it. So an earthquake, when you look at the tectonic plates and what's happening there, there's a buildup of tension, because if you can imagine that you have these kind of plates, and you have these basically large sheets of rock, and they will be connected, right? And then, because everything on this planet is moving, they will move very slowly, and they will still be kind of intertwined or connected. And at some point, the tension is such that all of a sudden it breaks, right? And that's an adjustment. It means that there has been change and movement, and the current connection cannot hold it anymore. And then it's a correction to re-established harmony based on the adjustments in nature. Now, how is this relevant to our own lives? As a symbol, right, it can be transferred to a relationship, for instance. Think of today's political climate, with polarization and people having very strong political opinions, right? In a relationship, we often think that, well, we're basically one person. We need to have the same opinions about everything, and we need to be in the same place, because otherwise it's a threat to the whole relationship. And then maybe you come to a point where you realize, well, we can't insist on having the same opinions, because we have different journeys, we have different experience, we have different upbringing. Our value systems are different, right? And sometimes that tension can all of a sudden just kind of snap. And then either the relationship breaks or the belief system breaks, because it's to restore harmony. It's always, all adjustments in nature is about restoring harmony. So it means maybe then you come to an agreement. Well, you know, we have different political views. That's fine. We can still love each other, right? But simply that tension and the buildup of tension, all of a sudden snapping because it's too much. So when we think of that mechanism, and we'll look at the area where this happened, Syria, that's been, you know, in the news for many, many years. The conflicts, you know, and if we also think of it like often when things happen locally, it doesn't mean that the karma is just local. Because when you look at Syria, it became more of a global thing, right? And Turkey also want to be part of the global scene, and they cause conflict, and they have a lot of internal conflict. There is a lot of tension in that whole area. It means that there is a buildup. And we think of this as a conversation. It means that the parallel process is happening in the planetary consciousness and also in the manifestation that is this planet. And then when it snaps, it is actually a correction to achieve harmony in nature. Sometimes that means we need to harm ourselves in order to begin healing. Often, as we also see in our personal lives, you know, if we have a conflict, it can also be in our relationship, for instance, right? And there's a lot of fighting, and you want to divorce your partner, and then you end up in a car accident. And just like that, the conflicts are gone, right? And it's happened so many times that we look at our different conflicts, we think they're so important until something really important happens. And when you then are confronted with the possibility of losing your partner, all of a sudden that becomes reality. And you realize that this is the most important person in my life. And it's that. This is why there are corrections that can seem violent, but the objective in nature always to harmonize. We create so many conflicts, and humans are really good at creating conflicts. But remember, it's also part of how the planet is exploring itself. Humans are part of the planet, and again, humans have a tendency to forget this. We think that it's all about us always, that the planet is here for us. When you look at many religions, that's also their origin stories, right? It's first the human, and then God made the planet for them to do whatever. But when we understand that humans also in this ecosystem spiritually has a specific purpose beyond just being human, right? Just like when you look at the bacteria in your intestines, they have no idea you exist, right? They just do their thing and live in their world. They have no idea that you exist. And humans behave the same way, that we do our thing and we have no idea it's connected to something beyond us. Just like I often talk about that what's happening with humans, it does not stop on this planet. Humans are part of a greater family of species, which is also why what happens here has an effect beyond this planet. And this is also part of why we are here. Because it's not just that humans interest us, but it's also that it's part of the collective karma, where what happens in the human consciousness and the human journey is part of the journey of the greater family. And we always need to look at these bigger pictures and understand that, yes, what's happening in nature, when you look at the whole planet as an organism, it's this exchange where everybody, no matter the level of consciousness or evolution, everybody's trying to figure out the same thing. And just like you can have words that are, that open up everything, they're so complex and they can give you so many ideas and thoughts. You also need punctuation. You need comma, right? Nothing in itself, but it also expresses something. And it means the ecosystem is that. Everything is needed. Everything is part of the same expression, the same journey, and the same language. So, part of what's happening in the world, of course, there's a lot of tension now. Because what we see what's happening, not just with the earthquake, with Ukraine and all of that, we're looking at a major change in human culture. And the collective consciousness of humans will have to make some major decisions about which ways to go. And that's part of everything that's happening now. So, because when you think of it, part of what's happening in the Ukraine, what happened in Syria, was actually part of that. Remember that the discussion between the West and Russia has been going on for quite some time in different ways. So it's part of the expression. So we cannot look at the Ukraine as a separate thing because it's not. We're now in World War III. And there's so many different kind of expressions, and it's a very long sequence of events where Syria is part of it. Right? So this is why it's happening. It's all these different waves of tension and energy that also needs correction to also assist humans and also local consciousness in going beyond conflict. And if we're not able to go beyond conflict, still the mirror will be different. So in that area where the earthquakes happened, the area will kind of mirror a more harmonized and milder energy to not encourage conflict, but encourage understanding and also rebuilding, which is much more constructive. Any other questions? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's as the sort of aftermath of the earthquake is unfolding, one of the most, I think, provoking aspects for a lot of people is the slow revelation that so much of the devastation and the loss of life is directly linked to corruption. Corruption of the building system, the governing system, so many different aspects of Turkish society are basically coming to light as weak and corrupt. And I think a lot of people are really curious, what role does that corruption play in this particular unfoldment in Turkey?
Yeah. This is also an interesting aspect, right? Because corruption is, in a way, trying to find shortcuts and getting away with it. And this corruption has been especially clear in buildings, right? And letting them get away with, letting people get away with building houses that are not strong enough to withstand earthquakes and all of that. And they've all been, as long as they pay a fee, they've been allowed to, break the rules. So that is interesting. It's also showing that, we have to be more thorough, right? If we dreamt it, if that was your dream, right? And there's an earthquake and you have a massive devastation, and a lot of it, and a lot of the buildings should not have been built in the first place because they were not built based on current regulations and safety measures, right? If you were dreaming this, you would know, right, I'm actually not being thorough enough. Right? I'm trying to get away with half-assing things and telling myself this is okay until things happen. Right? This is why the dialogue with nature is so necessary, because we get correction. And that being said, you know, what I think is interesting, because I talked with Andy about this a few days ago, is that corruption is necessary. And from a spiritual point of view, many will say, that's strange. Yeah. And I'll explain to you, because it's a really funny principle. Corruption is absolutely necessary because it's where creativity is. Now, humans are not very advanced, which means that most creativity is about greed. It's about self-interest. So, corrupt people are the ones bending the rules, breaking the rules, and is trying to get to a potential that one can see, and getting to it in a straight line and getting away with it. And that is often smart, because if everybody followed the rules, human civilization would collapse. Because the ones who are innovative, trying to be creative, find better ways of doing things, those are the ones with a corrupt mindset. When you enter a new space, no matter what it is in your life, you will build your assumption about the new space based on your own experience so far. And you will apply those rules. And so, okay, I know how to do this. And you will recognize things you can do, and then you try doing them. And by doing exactly that, life will expose you to, well, in this space it works differently. That movement in itself is corruption. Is thinking you understand how you can get to a potential and get away with it without having learned how to productively do it in balance with a new space. It's also important to understand that nobody ever gets away with anything. Ever. It has never happened. Because whatever we do, we're doing it in ourselves, to ourselves, and in nature, and to nature. And it's one conversation. So it's like when we learn how to ride a bike, for instance. You know, we fall off. That's not God's punishment. But we fall off the bike and we, get a minor injury, whatever. It's part of it. But the thought that I can do this without actually knowing how to do it, that's corruption. And think of also, when there is war, in times of crisis, who are the ones who get the wheels going? Not the law-abiding citizens, because they sit there and wait for instruction. It's the corrupt ones. They start the black markets. They just do whatever because they say, I can make money out of this. I just want to, and that greed makes sure that people are starting to have lives again. We need corruption to a certain level. This is why it's impossible to get rid of it. Also, in the world economy, a big part of it is in that corrupt kind of black market. And the black economy, it's not possible to get rid of it. Also because people who really deal with economy in advanced ways, they know it's necessary. Because that's where you also find the creative ones. The ones who try to figure out shortcuts. The ones who try to be innovative in kind of entirely new ways. Yes, it's greedy. Yes, it's self-serving. Yes, it's illegal. But from a larger perspective, that doesn't matter. Following the rules is not necessarily a good thing. Nothing new can come of that. Right? Innovation is something new. Then you have to go beyond what is already in existence. It's also ways of thinking. It's what we do, it's what we try to achieve. If you think of a law-abiding citizen, just following the rules, the thought will be about doing what already exists. Nothing new there. right? So we need corruption. We need to corrupt ourselves to a certain degree, which means that you should not be following your own rules. The moment you follow your own rules, you're fucked. You're basically trapped. We have to figure out, how can I break my own rules? And especially when we see a potential, like my own rules stop me from getting there. I have to try to get there, and then we try. And we think we get away with it sometimes, but then life will over time show us, well, this is not quite how things work. You need to be able to do this and that in order to be able to repeat this, right? So, therefore, yes, one can say the part of the exchange is that when you look at Turkey and what they want to achieve, there are some big thoughts about what they want to achieve, who they want to be in the world, right? And that's fine. It's okay for a nation to want to be great. And then there are other shortcuts necessary in order to be able to project that greatness. Buildings, structures, the symbol for the backbone you build, right? So it's just showing that, yeah, general corruption, it's because they want to project something that is greater than what they actually are, and that's fine. But then nature is now trying also to correct that, well, you need to pay more attention to structure and build properly, right? So that is definitely part of the conversation going on.
That, to me personally, that's one of the fascinating parts of this discussion of corruption, because in one way, that corruption, that shortcutting that you talk about, it got Turkey to, they were able to build millions of housing units for a lot cheaper than they would have if they had followed earthquake codes and done that whole thing. So until this moment when the earthquake reveals that sort of the weakness and the lack of structure, they were really, proud of what they'd achieved, and a lot more people had homes than they would have otherwise. But when I know when law-abiding people talk, we get so angry about the people who are corrupt because everyone else is following the rules, and yet those few people who break the rules, they get to skip ahead, or they get advantages that we don't get. It's such a fascinating angle to think that corruption is actually really necessary for us to move forward, really.
Yeah. And also think of, for instance, when you just follow the rules in your own life, right? The rules you invented, the religious rules, political rules, all of that. The chance of you having new experiences will be relatively, slim. Think of, you walk past a garden and you see a fruit you've never tasted. There's that, Is that, well, I really shouldn't, but I should, and it's that. And from a spiritual perspective, the corruption is stretching beyond what you're currently capable of, what's beyond your current space. And you get a taste of it, but you're not ready. So you don't have the structure, right? So then you have to do what is corrupt to try to have a piece of that reality when you have not built the necessary structures. But then sometimes, tasting that fruit can change your life. You say, wow, this is what I want to do. I have to grow those fruits in my own garden. And then you do the work. That is how corruption can be productive. You can even, be arrested for trespassing, but it might be worth it. Then take the consequence, but then still you've tasted something beyond your current space, and that can inspire you. Sometimes also, it's not like I'm trying to tell people to be criminals here, but if we just understand the idea in a more symbolic way, even when people steal sometimes, it can connect them to the dream, like if they're poor, the dream of having a better life, taking part in the life that other people have, and that energy and that vibration, right? And if they then use that to inspire themselves, and then they do it for real. This is how we are supposed to kind of use corruption spiritually, is we try something, we try to get away with it, and then nature will show us, no. And then we can do it for real. But then at least we have kind of reach out and try to grab something. So it's a way to be proactive in our own growth, in our own evolution, instead of just sitting there, right? And this is why, again, we need a certain amount of corruption, and we need a certain amount of those people in the whole world economy to make sure that it actually works. Mm-hmm.
So in a way, we need the corruption first and then the correction.
Exactly, yes. And that will always happen. Somehow, again, do not think of punishment. They get what they deserve. It's not by that. It's a communication. It's a dialogue. It's you stretching into something where you have not learned. You don't have the structure to do it properly. And then life will correct you, not to stop you from it, but through that process to learn how to do it for real. So, if you look at Turkey again, they want to be this great nation, a major player, right, in the global field. And then now nature's telling them, well, great ambition, but, you got to do it thoroughly. You have to build, a strong foundation. You need to build those structures. Because as a major player, you can't do that. You cannot do it that way, right? So it's still part of the communication. Nature will always support attempts at being better. That's what evolution is. And through that energy, the planetary consciousness will also grow because it's part of the same body.
Göran here in Norway makes an interesting observation that natural disasters and catastrophes, from his observation, seem to strike the poorer or developing parts of the world more often. The question is how accurate is that observation? And if it is true that natural disasters hit the developing world more often, why do they not happen more often in the richer countries?
Well, it does happen in richer countries as well. When we look at the United States, for instance, it happens all the time. There are so many floods, so many whatever, and Australia as well. But in Europe, there's relatively little, right? Because it's not enough kind of tension in the ground. It's a very small area. So when you look at, yes, the areas where there are lots of people and where they're poor, it's part of their dialogue as well. Remember that there's a reason why countries are poor. That is part of the collective consciousness. One can always blame other countries and culture, all that, but it's still the journey of that particular nation. And sometimes natural disaster can be part of that conversation, both trying to wake them up, trying to correct them, because one can also be very stuck in poverty. One can be very stuck in just getting used to it. Humans adapt, all life forms adapt, and you can get used to and adapt to a low level of ambition. Right? And remember also that what is happening on the planet today, we've started a process of global harmonization. This will be, over time, one planet and one people. And when it comes to the one people thing, we're not quite there yet, right? A lot of things will have to be worked out. So this is also why we have an increase in conflicts, increase in natural disasters as part of that conversation. You can also say, well, that's because of environmental changes. Yes, that is also part of it. It's how we interact with nature and how nature responds. So a lot of things are happening, and that will increase as part of the process of creating more harmony and making sure that we become one in a global culture because it's necessary. So we need more activation in many areas in different ways. It's not just natural disasters. Activation can also be innovation. But often when you have areas that are kind of like behind, they sometimes need a little poke. Nature uses all sorts of strategies in that. And again, there is no such thing as punishment. It's just that we're being mirrored in so many different ways. And in whatever way it shows itself, that's because that represents the inner process in the collective body of humans. Any other questions?
There's a question also as spiritual students and things, when, let's say, family or friends are drawn to places, I think California is a great example of, there's just so much happening there, and yet California is inundated with earthquakes, mudslides, floods, wildfires, drought, you name it. How do we assist people in understanding that when they're drawn to a place like California, let's say they're going to move there, it's also that they're drawn karmically to the potential of being part of that conversation with nature, and like, is it personal then? Is it part of their personal karmic journey? And what about differences in geographies? Because they are so different from place to place.
Mm-hmm. I think talking with people about this can be difficult because either you understand this or you don't. And people are drawn to what they need. As just like karma vibration is location. And it's so funny sometimes to see there can be a disaster area, a flood or earthquake, and all the houses are gone, and then they rebuild the same spot. And after a few years, it happens again, right? And then they rebuild. The same people rebuild their houses in the same spot. When they're, and it happens again. It's because they can't stop. Because they are drawn to that exact location and they have no idea why. But it becomes a compulsion because humans are not smart. Humans are not kind of like awake, are not kind of awareness driven, right? Humans are mostly asleep and are driven by reaction and impulses. They have no idea why. So for instance, when people do that, you say, like, why? But from a spiritual perspective, because this is the exact location that represents their own karma. And they're just like gravitating towards it. And this is how it is. So yes, when people are drawn to certain places in the world, it's because it represents the location of their own karma. And they're just drawn. And yes, everything that comes with it is then part of the kind of outer rendering of their own consciousness. So I think rather than talking with people about this, unless they're very open, you can just like enjoy watching it. Not just, people moving into natural disaster, that's not the point, but enjoy seeing why people move to certain places. And also in your daily life. Why are you drawn to certain places? This also happens every day. Why do you find yourself in that spot at that exact time or that exact thing happened? Same thing. And it's understanding this as the exact kind of sequencing and unpacking of your own karma and your studies in life, trying to lay it out for you so you can like piece it together And this is what we learn over time by studying this language and getting it. So you can see that happened, and then that happened, that happened. Okay, these are different words. I can combine them. And then this is how it works. So it's not just looking at something individually, because it basically is reading a book and looking at a word. You will not necessarily understand what the book is about. So you can look at individual manifestations and understand those, but it's a greater contextual kind of sequencing of everything in your life. That's when you will start to get the real information, right? And we're all part of this. We're all part of each other's books and expressions and journeys. So we all operate as parts of this enormous kind of theater of communication. So when you look at people from this perspective, you can see that everybody is kind of moving based on this, and they have no idea. They're responding to what they feel as a gravitational pull to be there and do that. And then whatever is happening around them is the rendering of their process. And it happens every second in your life too, but try to look at it more this way, and then try to kind of scale it up so you can see your kind of greater life choices. And often where you are drawn, and this is also interesting, often the most pivotal experiences did not happen because you planned them. They happened because you all of a sudden found yourself there. Right? Because this gravitational pull is stronger than your sense of reason. So when a normal person look at the most important events and how they happened, they were not planned. They happened. Because this is how it works. So we need to learn to work with this, and life is always trying to guide us. This is basically what guiding is. That you are part of this conversation, and life is trying to lead you to their next clue. Not just for you, but also for nature. Remember that you are part of the digestive process, the reflection, the inner work of the planet, of other life forms on this planet that can't do it. They will be gravitating towards the same point as well. So often when you're being triggered, there's a whole list of information that then enters your mind and your process, and you're processing, and there's a lot of stuff, and sometimes you feel this is not even mine. Yeah, exactly, because you are assisting everyone else in different levels of evolution in that exact spot. This is how it works. And the same thing with other life forms and other levels of life. They are helping you digesting in whatever they are good at, right? We're all in this together. But it's fun to look at both small events and major events, both in your life and also in the collective lives of everyone from this perspective, because it is a language and it's absolutely logical.
I was thinking of how we can use it as a mirror and something to interact with. Here we're sitting in Norway on our safe couches and are watching this. But while you were speaking, I saw my parallel process of me studying with you. Like first how my resistance make me shake and then my corruption of trying to learn and trying out things and not really learning and then becoming more and more inspired to do it correctly. So I used, whenever you talked, that mirror and interacted with it. And I wonder if you could say something more when there is something that seems far away, but still really hits us like this has done, how we can interact so we also co-create with it.
Right.
And
you need a criminal mindset. That's me. That's what we've learned today. It's that. Break your own rules, because when something is there and yet not quite, it's always because we have a set of rules in ourselves. That means that I can't do this because, it's all of that. And the fastest way is a criminal mindset. that rules are simply something that stupid people make up because they are afraid, right? It's always the fear that create rules, always. Whether it's on an individual basis or a kind of group thing, it's always fear. We need to protect ourselves. We need to protect people from themselves. That's part of modern civilization. If you look at the EU, it's an orgy in just like figuring out how we can protect people from themselves, right? And that's stupidity. And it's the thing where, you know, that one I've seen so many times. There's been experiments done, for instance, in the UK, where they have looked at like the more regulations they had in traffic, the worse it got because people stopped thinking, right? And when they then remove rules and remove signs and everything, people have to think, and they get less injuries and less accidents, right? So there's something about that, right? Then you have to act from yourself and what you think is productive. And this is where we need to go. So when we have made too many kind of traffic regulations in our own life, all of a sudden we can't move and we can see it, but then we have like 5 different fences that we have to pass. And when we're law abiding, well, there's a fence there, so obviously I can't go. Like, you built the fucking fence, you know, demolish it. And you know, this is what corruption is like you choose the goal over the rules that tell you that you can't do it, right? And there is something important in that. So we all need to be a little bit criminal in our own lives and get challenged. I don't have to follow rules, especially my own, right? And really challenge that and see if you can see it, you can actually reach it. And the thing is, yeah, sometimes it doesn't work, but then we can always learn after. Because at least then we have the taste. At least then we have stretch. And also spiritually, what happens in the journey of most is that also spiritually we overstretch. Like, spiritual corruption is the worst and the best at the same time. Because often what happens when we have too much confidence, and a typical is spiritual students on their journey saying, well, I'm ready for that. You know, I want to stretch, I want the insight in this. And the teacher will say, well, maybe you're not quite ready. Well, yes, I am, you know, because I've been working very hard. And then sometimes we simply, okay, go ahead. And of course, their heads will always explode. They will injure themselves so badly that it could take like cycles of lifetimes just to kind of get in balance. But that's fine. At least then they know. And they can also get the understanding, oh, this is why I'm doing all of this. This is why I'm doing all this healing work. Because they get a taste. There's nothing wrong with it. This is also why we allow it and why it happens with so many. At some point, when overstretches, when we open spaces that we're not ready for and will become so imbalanced, right? There's nothing wrong with it. It's just different ways of exploring. And then we get smarter. When we do this to ourselves enough times, we figure out, okay, maybe I should find a better balance. But the worst thing we can do is blocking ourselves from growth because we have made a rule. That's the worst thing. Then being a criminal is better, also in real life. Mm-hmm.
I have to laugh a little bit because I think if we're here in Norway, the most of us are, you know, signed up for a fairly quiet spiritual journey since nothing happens here. But Eva on YouTube, she shouted out that she moved to LA specifically to interact with the best and the worst at the same time. Mm-hmm. And then Leo in LA on Zoom, he is really interested. You're talking a little bit about the potentials with this earthquake and other big events and the world moving toward one people. Mm-hmm. And he's curious, does that mean that the world could actually become borderless at some time? And then excitedly he's like, if yes, when can we expect that to start happening?
You have to reincarnate for that, bitch. Because what we're seeing now, what we'll see, without me being too specific about what will happen in the next decades, is that we will go from a globalized economy and we'll take a step back. Because the conflicts between the different areas will increase. And there will be more of a underlying trade war. If you think of the Cold War, but in business, it means that we will have to rely more on kind of local production, local everything. It's not just in the States that they're thinking and talking about this. This will be a thing all over the world. So when it comes to like global trade, we will see that we will take a step back as part of people being overwhelmed by globalization because people don't want it. They think because they are afraid. So it will also then manifest in business. So we will go into a time where we actually will have more borders than we've had for a while in different ways because people simply need to climatize to the idea that we're moving towards one planet. And then, new generations, will be very comfortable with it, and then it will happen. So this will take time, and we're talking next century, right? This will be a phase of human history where these conflicts will have to be worked out because it's the way we can harmonize ourselves on the planet is that all conflicts will have to be worked out. And they do not just disappear. Because when people have different positions, different philosophies, different ways of thinking, and they all think that they are right, yeah, they have to kind of fight it out until they see that this is just silly. And we will get to that point. But this will be a very kind of turbulent century. But we will get there. But one thing also that Eva mentioned that, the best and the worst, this is back to what I'm saying, like, when you have to think, because you both have the best and the worst and everything in between, you need to navigate, right? When everything is safe, you don't have to pay attention. You don't have to think, and you fall asleep behind the wheel. So when, you have more of everything, you have to be mindful. You have to be aware. You have to make choices. This is also why it's good for the awakening of the consciousness that there is more conflict. There is such a great illusion when it comes to spiritual work that, well, as consciousness grows, there will be this peace and harmony, we'll all hold hands and flowers in our hairs and everything is love. It will be more brutal because that's how we can wake up. We will wake up because we have to. So when we have to be more aware in our choices because otherwise it's dangerous, we will become more aware. We will have to learn to navigate because we cannot fall asleep behind the wheel. We have to wake up, which means it has to be more dangerous. Our choices will have to mean something. And it means, for instance, just like you see on the internet. Yeah, you can be swindled like 50 times a day if you're not paying attention. When it comes to information, most of what you are served, it's all lies. You have to learn to navigate because we've grown into just trusting things because they are there. Well, if it's on the internet, it must be true, right? Because they will make sure that it's censored. No, they will not. You will have to learn to navigate. And this is where we're at, right? And this is why all of this is happening, not just natural disasters, but everything. You have to wake up because you are already behind the wheel. And for that to happen, you need danger. You need consequences. You need things happening that teaches you you can't trust anything or anyone. I have to rely on my own choices. That is what will wake the human up. So this is why what we're experiencing now is awakening. It doesn't happen the way we hope kind of romantically that it will happen. We will only wake up when and if it's absolutely necessary. And it's just like, when you drive your car and you're on the motorway, if you're commuting to work, you're kind of falling asleep, right? Because everything is like the way it always is, and you're not paying attention. And then all of a sudden, you almost, drive into a car in front of you. You get that little kind of jolt. That's what we're talking about, and good morning to you, right? And this is why we're talking about. This is why it's so important that all of these things are happening. You can't trust things just to work. And then, at the same time, humans are inventing more and more technology to compensate for that because I just want to sleep behind the wheel. And life is going, no, you're the driver. And then humans are trying to compensate more AI, more technology, more this, more that, so we can just like, I just wanted to, drive by itself. And life's saying, no. You have to pay attention. And if not, it will have consequences. So look at that in your own life and look at this happening globally. It's actually a good thing from a spiritual perspective because we need to wake up. It doesn't happen by everything being in harmony. It happens because there is an enormous experience of disharmony and that we snap out of the idea that we can just trust them to fix it for us.
In that way, Los Angeles is a fascinating sort of nexus of awakening with so much stretching and innovation, and then lots of correction. But then they just keep going, innovating and stretching and exploring. As we move toward a conclusion, Linetta had a really interesting observation that she wanted to share as she's here in Norway, where tectonic plates create earthquakes because of tension, and we've had also continents that have disappeared, and I guess she's wondering it's because of the consciousness that needed that a continent disappears or a new one arises. So her question is it likely that in the future new continents will surface because we reach a new level of consciousness on the planet? And if a new continent does arise, can that location actually be the same as a previous continent, but now in an upgraded consciousness because it's like the continent has reappeared? Like the planet also needed water to upgrade the land or something like that. The question is also related to why our surface on this planet is mostly water, leaving us to quarrel about this sort of lack of land as so valuable, and maybe we need more space and that kind of thing. So will nature deliver us new land when our consciousness is there?
Right. Short answer to your first part of the question, yes. Now, the second part of it, why is there so much water? Because water has to do with information and connectivity. I've talked previously about that part of the function of this version of the planet is to experience disconnectedness and a positive disconnectedness. This is part of what humans are good at. When you look at human civilization, it's just like, oh, we do whatever we want to, and we're not being in harmony with life, not being in harmony with nature, which is part of what humans are supposed to do, because it means that then we can think new thoughts, new ideas. Again, back to the corruption thing. Humans are extremely corrupt, and that is also a good thing when it comes to kind of breaking through and breaking past old rules and stuff. So individuals also incarnate on this planet to experience that positive disconnectedness. So when we're disconnected from nature and nature's harmony, which is I can do whatever I want without consequence, right? That is basically human civilization. And that is a corrupt thought to start with. So this is why we need so much water, because to be in a state of corruption, it's not just humans. It's this planet that studying disconnectedness in a creative way, because you need to be disconnected in order to think that I can just do whatever I want. I can be creative, right? Just look at people today and young people. I just want to be me. I just want to express that no matter what, and just they do, and they figure things out and invent stuff. Yeah, in a culture where you are connected to nature, you wouldn't be doing that, because that level of self-centeredness and narcissistic creativity would not exist. But this is part of the journey. Water, contains everything. And the thing is, if you think of it like particles, that were part of historical figure like Napoleon, for instance, right? Every bottle of water you drink will contain particles from his urine. this is how widespread particles are. So in water, you find basically the result of everything, the information and particles of everything that's ever been. That's the connectedness. So we have a body of connectedness and information that balances out the human journey of creative disconnectedness. Remember, that's not a disharmony in itself. And it kind of is structurally, but the purpose is exactly that, to be able to innovate and go beyond nature and do new things. And this is the enormous strength of the human life form and civilization, the ability to think beyond nature and just do things because that sounds fun. That's what I want to do, right? And we've done that. But now humans have to learn to do that without destroying the planet. That's the correction. That's part of the conversation. So humans will learn over the next couple of centuries to work with nature and to listen again and be innovative and creative, but at the same time not harm the very body they live in, because that's not very smart. So, it will balance itself out. But again, we need the body of water to balance out and to enable a life form that lives in a state of disconnectedness.
We are wrapping up for this evening. This has been IKYA Live about the earthquake in Turkey, and one of our listeners informed us that just before we got started, they had the largest aftershock since the major quake in the same exact region of Turkey. So may we all send love, growth, and healing in their process as they move out of this event. And a reminder that we are with you every Monday at 7 o'clock Oslo time for IKYA Live. And please subscribe to our YouTube channel, share this episode and the other episodes of IKYA Live with others, show them how to watch them, show them how to subscribe. Follow us on Instagram and TikTok, ikya.official. And until next time, next Monday at 7, we wish you a beautiful week, and we'll see you at the next IKYA Live.